ever thought about what's on your plate, like for dinner? And theology.
Interesting connection.
Yeah. Like, is there one? Well, that's what we're digging into today. We've got these excerpts, right? And they're from, get this, a series of theological studies.
Okay. Sounds intense.
It's called, and I love this, I Believe in God the Father Almighty, Creator of Heaven and Earth.
Oh.
I know, right? So what makes it even more interesting is the authors, they've actually lived this stuff, not just, talking about it. For decades, they've had this farm and they've been putting these principles into practice.
It's like they're living the text. That's pretty cool. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, they really challenge, our assumptions about farming.
Really?
In what way? So they say that mankind's purpose, even before, the Adam and Eve story, involved working with nature.
Okay.
Not as some sort of afterthought, but as a core part of who we were, created to be.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's like we were always meant to be connected to the land in that way.
Right. So we were always meant to be farmers.
In a sense, yeah. The authors even compare the joy Adam and Eve found, tending the Garden of Eden to Mozart composing music.
Wow.
It's about this idea of co-creativity.
Co-creativity. I like that.
Yeah, it's like we participate in God's, ongoing creation by shaping and cultivating the natural world.
So it's not just we're passive inhabitants, right? We're active participants in this whole creative dance with nature.
Exactly. We have this unique ability to observe, to understand, and then to work with the natural world to help it flourish.
I love that. Okay, so that's beautiful and all, but then, there's the fall.
Right.
So, doesn't that kind of throw a wrench in our whole cosmic gardening plans?
It definitely introduced challenges, big time. The text actually describes how the earth itself changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were seasons now.
Yeah.
And thorns and thistles. Even animals, they wouldn't obey anymore.
Wow, talk about things getting real.
Right. It wasn't the idyllic garden anymore.
Not exactly. So, what did our early ancestors do?
Well, our work became way more difficult.
I bet.
But it also became, even more crucial. That call to be caretakers.
Yeah.
It remained. But now we were tasked with, working with a world that was a lot less harmonious, a lot more prone to, chaos,
So the stakes were higher.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about maintaining paradise anymore. It was about, figuring out how to thrive in a world where things didn't always go as planned.
And that's where the story of agriculture really begins.
Exactly. Because faced with these challenges, humanity had to figure out how to,
provide for itself.
Yeah. And the approaches we took, the choices we made, they've shaped our relationship with, food and the earth ever since.
So here we are, right? Thousands of years later, and we're still grappling with that same challenge. How do we feed ourselves? But this time, without, wrecking the planet.
It's the ultimate balancing act, isn't it?
Totally. And the authors of our text, they suggest that throughout history, there have been, two main approaches to this whole food and farming thing.
Yeah, they call them biomimicry and force.
Okay, I like where this is going. So, biomimicry, it makes me think of those, gecko feet grippers,
Yeah, using nature to inspire technology.
Exactly. So is that what we're talking about here?
It's definitely part of it. But in agriculture, biomimicry is more about observing, nature's patterns and its limits. It's about working within those limits to produce food sustainably.
So it's less about conquering nature and more about, collaborating with it.
Exactly. And the text gives some really cool examples of this. Things humans figured out a long time ago, like crop rotation.
Okay, how does that fit in?
Well, it mimics the natural cycles of forests. And then there's managed grazing, which is learning from how wild herds move across the land.
Oh, interesting.
Even something like rice paddies, That's a way to work with a plant's natural, affinity for water.
I never thought about it that way. That's so cool. But I'm guessing the force approach is a little less harmonious.
You could say that. Force is all about trying to overcome nature's limits through, sheer power, often through technology.
And I'm guessing that comes with a few more downsides.
It does. The text gives the Roman Empire as an example, which I thought was fascinating.
Oh, really? How so?
So to feed their cities, right, they relied on grain imports from North Africa, grown on these massive slave-run farms.
Okay, so they were able to produce a ton of food.
For a while, yeah. But their methods, they ultimately led to widespread desertification.
So they basically destroyed the land they depended on.
Exactly. It's a classic example of what happens when we prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability.
Wow. talk about a cautionary tale, but does that mean like all technology in agriculture is bad? I mean, we've come a long way since Roman time.
Oh, absolutely. It's not that technology is inherently good or bad, but it's all about how we use it.
So how do we use technology in a way that aligns with like the principles of biomimicry?
Right, and that's where the text really digs into the problems with modern industrial agriculture. Because even with all the advances we've made, it still relies heavily on one thing.
Which is?
Fossil fuels.
Ah, that kind of puts a damper on things.
It does. And this reliance on fossil fuels, it creates all sorts of negative consequences.
Like what?
Soil degradation, pollution, health problems, even economic instability. We've essentially created a system that's really productive in the short term, but in the long run,
Not so much.
not so much.
Okay, so this is all starting to make a lot of sense, but it's also a bit, I don't know, daunting. If industry agriculture is the problem, what's the solution? We can't exactly go back to horse-drawn plows and expect to feed, like, 8 billion people?
You might be surprised. The text offers a solution that's, well, it's both simple and kind of profound.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Grass.
Grass. Okay, I gotta be honest, I'm a little skeptical. Like, grass is great and all, but it's everywhere, right?
I know, right? It doesn't exactly scream solution to our food problems.
Exactly. So, how does this work?
Well, think about it this way. Grasslands. They cover huge areas of the planet. And they're incredibly efficient, like way more than most crops at capturing sunlight.
Okay, so they're like giant solar panels just soaking up energy.
Exactly. But the real magic happens when we bring in, well,
Cows, sheep, all the grazing animals.
yeah, they're like our partners in all of this. Because you see, us humans, we can't really digest cellulose that well,
Cellulose, that's the tough stuff in plant cell walls.
Right, exactly. It's what gives plants their structure. And we can't break it down very efficiently. But grazing animals, they're pros.
So they're doing the work for us.
It's a beautiful system. They convert something we can't eat into all sorts of nutrient-dense food, meat, milk, all of that.
It's like this perfect symbiotic relationship.
It is, or at least it was. We kind of messed things up a bit.
Overgrazing, isn't that a huge problem?
Yeah, the text makes a really important distinction between like continuous grazing, which is super damaging, and holistic grazing.
Holistic grazing. Okay, that sounds more our speed. What's the difference?
It's about working with nature, mimicking those natural patterns we talked about. Like, think about how wild herds move across the land. They don't just stay in one place.
Right. They're always on the move.
Exactly. So with holistic grazing, you rotate the animals frequently. You give the pastures a chance to rest and regenerate.
So it's like giving the land a chance to catch its breath.
Exactly. And the results are amazing. I mean, there are studies that show that properly managed holistic grazing, it actually improves the land over time.
Seriously. So it's not just less bad. It's actually good for the land.
It can be, yeah. It increases biodiversity, builds healthy soil, even improves water retention. It's the opposite of tilling, which, really disrupts the natural soil structure.
Wow. Okay. So we got to work with nature's systems, not against them. I'm getting it. But this all sounds great if you've got acres of land. What about the rest of us, city dwellers who get our food from the grocery store?
That is such a good question, and one the text definitely addresses. It's not just for farmers, right? It starts with, awareness.
Like being more conscious of where our food comes from.
Exactly. Understanding the true cost of our choices.
Yeah.
Like even just supporting local farmers, buying direct whenever possible. Those are huge steps in the right direction.
It's like voting with your fork.
Right. Putting your money where your values are. But it goes even deeper than that,
Yeah.
The authors actually encourage everyone to find ways to participate in food production.
Even if it's just a tomato plant on our balcony.
Yeah, exactly. Even something that small, it connects you to the source of your sustenance in a really powerful way.
There's something so grounding about that.
There really is. And remember that idea of co-creativity we were talking about earlier? Tending the land, even in a tiny way. It's a way to kind of reclaim that part of ourselves, that connection to something, ancient and essential.
It's like we've outsourced so much of our lives, especially when it comes to our basic needs. We've forgotten the satisfaction that comes from providing for ourselves.
That's it, exactly. It's not just about the food. It's about purpose, about belonging, about understanding our place in this whole, grand scheme of things.
Wow. Well, this deep dive certainly took us to some unexpected places.
It always seems to happen, doesn't it?
It does. We started with theology, and we ended up talking about, the future of food and the planet. It's all connected. And that's what's so amazing about exploring these ideas. The way we grow our food, care for the land, it's all a reflection of our values, our beliefs, our hopes for the future.
It really makes you think. So listeners, next time you sit down for a meal, ask yourself, where did this food come from? And what role can I play in creating a food system that's, more just and sustainable? The answers might surprise you.